Topeka governing body meeting will come to order. Please rise as you are able and give your attention to Councilmember Mays for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to introduce Rachel Gardner. She is the Worship Administrative Assistant at Topeka Bible Church. Before she starts praying today, she wanted to just remind everyone that they are hard at work on their annual community light show for Christmas, and would like to invite everyone in Topeka to come to that, as it is their gift back to our city every year.
Council members, thank you for having me. Let's pray. Father, we pause for a moment amidst all the distractions of our busyness to thank you for who you are, for each and every one of the freedoms you've allowed us to experience daily, and for the opportunities you've laid before us and charged us with taking up. Lord, we ask that you guide these city leaders in their discourse that is so vital to the city of Topeka. May they speak with wisdom and conviction, and may they listen receptively with discerning minds. Grant these leaders humility in their service to the constituents, and in that same vein, Lord, afford them moments of peace to lighten the weight of this duty and the tension that often comes with it. We thank you, Lord, for your perfect leadership through the personal grace offered to each of us by relationship with your Son, Jesus. It's through him alone that we're able to make these requests to you, and it's because of your love for us that we seek to honor you in all that we think, in all that we do, and in all that we say. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we have two presentations this evening. Mr. City Manager?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Tonight, our first presentation will come from Andy Feaster. He's with Development Strategies. This is the consultant that is going to be doing our housing study. They've been meeting with stakeholders, and then yesterday also met with the steering committee that will work through the housing study. I'm going to let Andy cover things today, so welcome, Andy.
Hi, good evening, council members. Thank you for having me. Like the city manager said, my name is Andy Feaster. I'm with Development Strategies. We're a St. Louis-based urban planning and economic development consulting firm. We actually did the downtown housing study for downtown Topeka, and we're here now to start a citywide housing market strategy and market study and strategy. And tonight I'm going to give you a brief overview of who we are, what we're doing, and what we hope to achieve through this process. This is a quick overview of who we are, the core team from our company who's going to be working on the project. I'm the project director. A lot of my colleagues here have a broad range of housing expertise and urban planning expertise. Who we are, Development Strategies very much is what we do. We provide strategies about development and implementation, which is normally short-term strategies. How do you get a development out of the ground and successful? We also do deal with long-term strategies, planning projects. These are, long-term downtown plans to impact communities and incrementally over time. So we have a very, very broad view of the work we do that we bring to the projects, all projects we do. We have a very wide range of experience in housing. The map to the right just displays the location and the number of housing market studies we've done across the country. We do a lot of project-based housing studies for low-income housing, tax credit, affordable housing, market rate housing, and we also do community-wide housing studies. We are about midway through a similar study in Tulsa and are about to kick off a study in Omaha, in addition to recent work in Columbus, Greenville, and our past work here. When we talk about housing, we are talking about more than physical structures. We understand that housing is key to opportunity. We know that through recent research, housing quality is key to the outcomes for children in their lives. It's about the marketability of a community and its neighborhoods. It's about economic development and helping our companies attract talent to the community. And it's about stabilizing some areas that have seen disinvestment. So it's about many things, and we're trying to wrap our mind around all of these different factors as we're thinking about housing in Topeka. Our structure, we're the lead firm and the only firm working on this. We are going to lead stakeholder engagement, analysis, policy recommendations, market expertise, and development ideas. We're working with city staff as a client team who we're coordinating with. They're providing direction and feedback as we go. As city manager pointed out, we also have a steering committee that is helping keep us accountable throughout the project, providing direction. We'll provide a lot of feedback in terms of the strategies we recommend. And we're also meeting with a lot of different stakeholders. We met with 8 or 9 groups on this trip yesterday and today, and we're going to do a lot of follow-up calls with different people who weren't able to make it and who we also need to talk to. The process, we have about 5 steps. This trip was to kick it off, and we're moving into what we call the understand phase. This is where we want to know the context of Topeka, what are the opportunities, what are housing conditions, who's doing work in the housing realm, and what is the funding available today. We'll move into the analyze phase where we look at supply and demand and where there might be housing gaps in terms of what organizations are working in housing, kind of where are the gaps in the organizational side. And then we're going to work into identifying those specific housing needs, drafting some strategies to talk through and decide on a future direction for housing policy in the city. We'll provide a final report that will summarize the framework and why. And this will be about a 7-month process. We're hoping to wrap up next March. We have a lot of work to do. And after the stakeholder conversations, I think we have even more things to consider and more questions to answer. So what questions will this study answer? We're going to think about, is Topeka positioned to accommodate the housing needs of the wide range of households here and who might come here? What types of housing are missing from the market, and how can those products be encouraged? What are barriers for housing diversification, and what resources are needed to support different types of housing development? And basically, what is the current state of the housing stock? And then finally, who will carry these recommendations out? Some early observations. Topeka does have a diverse housing stock. You have older homes, historic homes, new homes, a very wide range of housing. Yet some product types are missing, like new construction apartments, townhomes, and more products that allow aging in place. The slow growth of your community has created challenges, and your housing stock is relatively affordable, but that can be a double-edged sword because there is still a substantial need for quality, affordable options and rents that help justify construction costs. Yet the time is right for Topeka to act because there's been an alignment of leadership to move Topeka forward and enhance its appeal and stature. This is just a quick list of the steering committee. We have 12 members. Again, they're going to help provide a perspective about housing issues, hold us accountable, help define the future direction of housing policy, and hopefully help with implementation when we are done with the project and gone. This is a quick list of stakeholders we've engaged so far. I've met with some developers, we're going to follow up with some faith leaders, landlords and property managers, major employers, and other groups. So what do we talk about when we are trying to understand housing trends? We look at such things as cost burden, which is paying more than a third of your income toward housing. We look at trends like major investors starting to buy up a lot of single-family homes in communities like Topeka that used to be first-time homebuyer homes. And we look at barriers such as availability of savings for a down payment and what that means in terms of stabilizing neighborhoods. In terms of market analysis, we look at people, product, and place. Who needs housing and what kind of housing do they need and where's the best location for that type of housing. We'll look at your single-family market and the range of options available. This is an example from Tulsa, where they have housing stock, ranging from 18,000 to over 300,000 in their core area. Similar housing product here. We'll look at a multifamily market, look at occupancy and achievable rents. And in terms of demand, we look at affordability, which is answering the question of what residents can afford. We look at different market segments that prefer different locations and products. We look at who might be moving to Topeka. We know that a lot of people who move to a new area rent housing and prefer an urban location like downtown. And we'll also compare Topeka to its peer cities and see how it stacks up and how the trends measure up. And maybe there's some potential programs we can learn from about how other communities have addressed some similar challenges. We'll also do a feasibility testing analysis of different products, which is looking at cost versus value to identify some of the challenges of developing different types of housing, ranging from multifamily to just renovating single-family homes in our neighborhoods. Where can we get the biggest impact, depending on the goals that come out of this process? And ultimately, we're going to frame the challenges. This is an example from Asheville. They wanted to increase housing demand, so that's about maintain and increasing desirability of the neighborhoods. They had a limited housing supply, so it's about increasing the housing supply, and how do you do that? And ultimately, we're going to provide a housing toolkit. I was going to say toolbox, but my slide says toolkit. So, which is about development, preservation, household assistance, and regulation. We'll look at different incentives, tax credits, how to use the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and we'll look at things that help individual households, such as rental assistance, property tax relief, homeowner counseling, and other programs. And ultimately, through a stakeholder workshop, we will kind of narrow the options to focus on the strategies and policies that will have the most impact in this place. And so we'll be back about 3 more times over this process. We haven't set the schedule yet, but I'm sure that Sasha will keep you up to date. Thank you.
Any questions? I have 2. On this first map that says City of Topeka and focus area, how are those focus areas determined?
Those are preliminary ideas. We've had some discussions with the client team. The intent of the focus areas is to look at challenges that are in several different places of Topeka, so that we can align strategies with those specific neighborhoods. We tried to get a mix of neighborhoods, such as, North Topeka has some condition challenges, some vacancy challenges, which are in other parts of Topeka. So some of the strategies that apply to North Topeka will apply to other areas. We picked Hillcrest because it's a little bit unique, because the housing stock, post-war housing stock, was not built to last 60 years, yet it's still here, and there's unique challenges to the slab on grade stock there. And we wanted to include suburban area too, because new construction is important, and it's something that is also in demand.
Okay, and then I noticed when you said on our early observations, the Topeka housing stock is relatively affordable, yet there's still a substantial need for quality affordable options, as opposed to what?
A lot of times the affordable housing options available outside of tax credit or HUD-financed homes are homes in poor condition that have not been adequately maintained, but it is cheap. And so one of the goals is to enable the development or preservation of quality units where there aren't condition challenges or, peeling paint, broken windows, things like that.
That are affordable.
Yes, that are affordable.
Okay. Anybody else? Councilmember Lister?
Thank you. What, two quick questions. What's the cost of the study and what, is it grant funded or where's the funding coming from?
Sasha can go into details on that.
Thank you.
So we did some fundraising to pay for the cost of the housing study. I had a little bit of money left over last year, about $33,000. The Topeka Community Foundation matched that with us. And then we were able to raise slightly over $100,000 to pay for the study. Our contract with Development Strategies is for $95,000.
495,000?
No, 95.
95,000, okay, good. Thank you.
Yes.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you. We'll see you later then. And welcome.
Thank you.
We move now to our second presentation this evening. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Tonight, we have Fire Chief Craig Duke will talk to us and explain some history and reality regarding the flow of hazardous materials through our area. So, Chief?
Deputy Mayor, fellow council people, I'd like to thank you for letting me appear before you tonight to bring this study to you. Some individuals I want to recognize at the back is our own Jim Green, our emergency manager, who's vice chair for this committee, and also Nelson Castile, who was the project manager for the county and the city on this project. And absent tonight is Mr. Steve Christenberry, who's the chair for it. But I'd also like to mention Councilman Cohen, who was also in attendance of that meeting. And that was very important for us to have someone like him at that meeting. So basically, this study is done it's recommended every 5 years, but this is year 10 for us here in the county and the city. The county emergency management was able to acquire almost a $26,000 grant to be able to set this study up. The commodity flow study, basically it's looking at what hazardous materials flow within our community, the county and the city, whether it be by road, by rail, or by pipeline. They obviously followed state and federal regulations on taking this study and how it's done and who's involved with it. The data that we received from this here was over the road trucks, carrying hazardous material. They're able to identify them, and then they would mark on their sheet what was flowing through our city at any given time for both over the road, railroad, and liquid and gas pipelines. What this does for us is really helps us in preparing and planning, and something that we will be doing following this evening. Obviously, we will get with emergency management and start to talk like what we've done before and how we'll planning and training and an exercise for the county in itself, most likely, hopefully, within the city limits. These are some of the products that fall under the hazardous material consignment here, explosive gases. I'm sure you've seen these placards in many vehicles traveling through our city. This was one incident that we had recently of 3 major incidents we had in our city with this vehicle overturning there about Adams and I-70. So they do happen. These are the areas that they had posts where individuals were counting and tabulating the products that flow through our community, which they did a really good job in this. I think the last grant that they had a company come in and do it and didn't do as good a job as Mr. Nelson Castile set up for us. These are the overroad trucks that we'll see, red being the highest traffic. That's basically I-70 north of just the edge of the city limits, going the north part of the city. So what they did over 240 hours at 15 locations, these are the types of things that they saw. Every hazardous class of the 9, they did see it on our roads in I-70. High hazards, that was of particular importance. Those are products that are air water reactive and toxic inhalation hazards. The busiest areas were Post 12, which was basically at the KTA, obviously people traveling, or trucks traveling in from the east to west and back west to east are going to go through. That's a major intersection for them. And post 11, which is basically just slightly south of where our water treatment plant is right now on I-70. And the lowest one was at post 7, which was at US 75 and Southwest 57th Street. So we found out, one of the most important things that we found out, that they're significantly higher than other Midwest counties with multiple interstate highways. So we have a heavy load of hazardous material products traveling through and in our community at any given time. Also, looking at some of the hazmat materials involved greatly exceeded anticipated levels. So what the study did before, they've actually gone up in some areas. And the high hazard transport, although that they are similar to Midwest counties with interstate highways, the I-70 north, just north of downtown Topeka, are significantly higher than some of the other communities of similar size with similar highways going through their community. There are the classes of hazmat materials we saw coming through the community, but the dangerous multi-hazardous loads, there's loads that there's not just one product being transported, there's multiple hazardous material products in the vehicle being transported at any that given time. That was something of significance that they did notice during the study. The railroads, there's 2 railroads within the community, Union Pacific and Burlington Northern. Union Pacific being the larger of the 2 with the amount of lines they have flowing through the community. There wasn't much problem with that there. They're up since 2018, but the one point of notice, or the bullet of notice, is the quantity and variety of high hazards flowing since 2018 through our community compared to similar sized counties with similar railroad operators working in the county. So we move on from that to the pipelines. There are 6 pipeline companies that operate within our community. And from that there's been no major incidents, very few incidents involving the pipeline. They have strict, rigid, guidelines they have to work through and how they operate. They do maintain them very well. The other issue with hazardous materials, we have those that are flowing through the community with the over-the-road, the railroad, and the pipelines, but we have those that are stationary, utilized within commercial manufacturing and everything. We have 133 Tier 2 facilities that we are aware of, and we do go out and visit those facilities to see the products they have and what their safety precautions are. But what we have to look at most is the inhalation hazards. Those are the companies that may have things like chlorine, ammonia. Those are the worst danger to us, because if there's a leak anywhere, it can travel throughout wherever the weather takes it. Compared to those facilities, say like AT&T, that's got huge multiple batteries with acids in them, and there are some of their facilities. If there's an incident there, it's probably just going to stay there for the cleanup and the mitigation of it. Here are some of the Tier 2 facilities through the community. There's probably a lot more than that there that's on here. This is not an updated map, but this is close to it. And this is what we're working towards here. The hotspot analysis, that looks to see where the receptors are. We're looking to see where there's schools, daycares, colleges, universities, hospitals, and anything that there's multifamily dwellings near and around highways, railroads, and pipelines. They do have requirements or standards, like with railroads, don't have any residential areas within a half mile. They'll have a buffer for that, the same for pipelines. And obviously roadways, it's a little bit closer, 0.25 miles, a quarter of a mile. And with the Tier 2 facilities, they recommend a 0.5 mile buffer zone. So the conclusions from this study, which was greatly needed in our area, we're going to prioritize looking at the hot spots to see where we have to work with our community partners, especially the schools, the daycares, and share this information with others, especially with planning and housing, that they know that there's certain facilities they may want to reconsider how they zone them, to make sure that we keep our citizens safe. And we will be working on an exercise. This is something we're looking forward to early next year. Well, they'll have a large exercise for our community. They did one, I think it was in 17, if I'm not mistaken, where it was a railroad incident, and they utilized first responders from all over the community to try to mitigate a railroad incident that could have been catastrophic to downtown Topeka. So that's my presentation for tonight. I just want you to be aware, we have worked with our partners in the community. We are going to continue to work with them. We'll continue to build a plan for the safety of the citizens in Topeka.
Wow. I didn't know all this was going through the city. So really, we haven't had, how many incidents have we had in the last 2 years?
Well, I know this year alone, maybe in the last 12 months, we've had 3 major ones. The one at 10th,
Right.
I mean, Adams and I-70, we had the one coming up 470 back onto 70. And then we also had the one near 10th and I-70 where the product was, we closed down the highway for 8 to 12 hours on both incidents, the large ones, the one on Adams and the one on 10th Street.
Wow.
And we're lucky enough that we work with the State Fire Marshal's Office. We are a responder for the state as well. If it's on a state highway bridge or whatever, we get reimbursed for the costs for our manpower and the equipment and the products that we use. On the Adams incident, we recouped approximately $15,000 for being on that incident because we used a lot of manpower, a lot of equipment, and a lot of cleanup products for that. And same with the one on 10th and I-70 with the polymer that spilt all over the road. Although it wasn't a hazardous material, it made the road hazardous. So it was took us hours to clean that up and try to stop that getting into the water system.
Well, thank you for keeping our city safe. Any other questions? Councilmember Emerson?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Chief Duke, thank you for your presentation. I did have a question. One of the things you mentioned was that that corridor of I-70 north of downtown, you said is significantly higher. And as you know, that's also one of the worst places in town, and that's the place I think there's been more semis turned over on their sides and things like that over the years. Given that these hazardous shipments are coming through that area, I'm curious, are you aware of any funding that could be, I know we're trying to fix that problem there with KDOT, but there's obviously funding issues.
Me personally, I'm not aware of that funds being available for that. Obviously, if the road was restructured in such a way that they wouldn't have that heavy curve right there. The one thing that we would hope would happen, that there's more warning signs going up for truckers to reduce their speed, you know, a sharp curve or whatever. But our biggest concern, obviously, is with these truckers, the drivers of the vehicles, is their speed on, and that's where most of them have their issues. They do take curves a little bit too quickly sometimes, not realizing that a steep curve is coming, a sharp curve is coming up.
Okay, well, I hope that's something we hopefully check into because, you know, it's, you know, a lot more material going through there and it's a terrible curve.
Yeah, and I just want to let you know, I mean, working with the emergency managers, you know, with the city and the county, we prepare. We have the people, the equipment to do so and to mitigate the problems. So we keep working on that constantly. So we do, and we look for ways to better do our job.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you, Chief. Okay, would the city clerk now proceed with the roll call?
Deputy Mayor Clear.
Here.
Council members Hiller.
Here.
Ortiz. Here. Emerson.
Here.
Padilla.
Here.
Jensen.
Present.
Mays.
Here.
Cohen.
Here.
And Lesser.
Here.
Okay, Mr. City Manager, are there any additions to the agenda this evening?
Yes, Deputy Mayor, there are. There are 2 additions to tonight's agenda. One of them is a resolution granting a noise exception that needs to be added to the consent agenda, and also an ordinance repealing the language contained in Title II related to the police and fire pension funds. It needs to be added as an action item.
Okay, the city manager requests that these two items be added pursuant to governing body rule 5.2 and TMC section 2.15.040. Is there a motion to approve these two items?
Motion.
Councilmember Emerson, move to approve.
Yes.
To add. And Councilmember Jensen, seconds. Okay, so all in favor vote yes? All opposed vote no?
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, these two items will be added to the agenda. Okay, we have one appointment this evening. Sharon Bedolla. Is she here? Is she present? Okay, she's appointed to the Shawnee County Juvenile Corrections Advisory Board. Would the city clerk please read?
A is a board appointment recommending the reappointment of Sharon Bedoya to the Shawnee County Juvenile Corrections Advisory Board for an unexpired term ending August 17, 2022.
Okay, we would like to thank her for her willingness to serve. We now proceed to the consent agenda, if the clerk would read. I'm sorry, we need to vote on that. All those in favor vote yes?
Motion.
It wasn't on my sheet. Okay.
All right.
Who moves to approve?
Motion to approve. Second.
And Jensen seconds. Vote yes. If you approve, vote no. If you do not,
We have 9 yes.
9 voting yes,
Excuse me, 8 yes.
8 voting.
So you're yes, so we have a 9 yes.
Okay, 9 voting yes, the appointment's approved. Thank you for your willingness to serve. We will now proceed to the consent agenda, if the clerk would read.
A is an ordinance introduced by Councilmember Karen Hiller designating a portion of the Crosby Place parking garage as temporarily exempt from the provisions of KSA 41719D and TMC 91502E for a special event known as Taste from the Top. B are minutes of the regular meeting of September 10, 2019. There are no applications. And D is a resolution introduced by Councilmember Sylvia Ortiz granting Augusta Munoz an exception to the provisions of City of Topeka Code Section 945-150 at seat concerning noise prohibition.
Okay, that's the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Councilmember Jensen moves to approve.
Second.
See, you raised your hand. Councilmember Padilla? Seconds. All in favor vote yes, opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the consent agenda is approved. Right, so we now proceed with the action item 5A, if the clerk would read.
A is an ordinance introduced by City Manager Brent Trout repealing Section 2.140.60 and Section 2.14290 of the Topeka Municipal Code related to police and fire pension funds.
Is there anyone here wishing to speak on this item, since this was added to the agenda? Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
Councilmember Jensen, seconded by Councilmember Lesser. All those in favor
Deputy
vote
Mayor.
yes.
I have a question, Deputy Mayor.
Question?
You know, looking on the TV there, it says ordinance repeal police and fire pension funds. Maybe we should talk about what we're doing before we vote on that. Okay? Thank you.
Mr. City Manager,
City Attorney.
City Attorney?
Councilmember Cohen, I have a 30-minute presentation I can provide you on this. Basically, what happened was the numbering was left out as it pertains to the police and fire pension funds when we went through this on the 3rd and the 10th. It was a really long ordinance, and we tried to catch everything as part of the recodification process. We missed that one thing. We talked about it on the 3rd, and the history behind that is the police and fire pension funds. Those individuals were taken out via ordinance previously. They are now all rolled into KP&F, which is part of the CAPERS retirement system, so they're covered. They're not losing their pension. This is just an outdated fund that we need to remove.
Okay, all those in favor, vote yes. Opposed, vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 having voted yes, the action item is approved. The non-action items, we now proceed to item, is it still 5A or does it now go to 5?
6A.
6A?
Yep.
Okay. Item 6A, discussion regarding the Central Park Neighborhood Plan, if the clerk would read.
A is a discussion related to the Central Park Neighborhood Plan as an element of the comprehensive plan.
Mr. City Manager.
Deputy Mayor, tonight Dan Warner will go through the Central Park Neighborhood Plan in detail so that we can all become familiar with it. Dan?
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening. The Central Park neighborhood is the 2019 SORT neighborhood. SORT stands for Stages of Resource Targeting. This is one of the city's neighborhood revitalization tools. The SORT process is year 1, which is the planning phase. It's the phase we're currently in. So we've updated their neighborhood plan. Central Park had a neighborhood plan from 2008. So as part of this process, we assess current conditions and identified projects. Years 2 and 3 are the implementation portion of the process. There's $1.7 million available for infrastructure projects and approximately $330,000 of federal housing funds. Our previous SORT neighborhoods are Quinton Heights and Tennessee Town. They're currently in years 2 and 3 and are under construction. The Central Park planning area, Central Park is located southwest of downtown. The northern boundary of the neighborhood is Huntoon and 13th Streets. Western boundary is Washburn Avenue. South is Southwest 17th Street, and east is Topeka Boulevard. The neighborhood is approximately 200 acres and has approximately 2,300 of population. Little quick note about process. So Central Park was awarded the SORT grant in 2018. We kicked off the process with the neighborhood in February of this year and had monthly plan review committee meetings throughout the spring and summer. We had a final meeting with the neighborhood in August and also went to the Planning Commission for a public hearing in August, and they recommended approval of the neighborhood plan. Little note about history. So in 1901, the city acquired the land that would become Central Park for $1. You can see on the site plan that's on the left, the park originally had 3 ponds, and it was really a jewel for the neighborhood and also for the city. In 1966, a major tornado swept through the neighborhood and caused a great deal of destruction. 2 of those ponds, the northern one and the central one, were filled in with debris from the houses that were cleaned up, and so there's just 1 pond remaining now. One of the issues upon rebuilding of the neighborhood was that it was zoned for multifamily, so multifamily structures were rebuilt where single-family homes were and weren't necessarily in character with those homes or the homes that were remaining. And, there was a plan done in 1998, and Central Park at that time was part of Holiday Park. And there was the implementation step from that neighborhood plan was to rezone portions of that neighborhood to reflect the single-family nature of it. So I mentioned earlier there was a plan in 2008, so this was the first time that Central Park was part of the SORT program. So a couple of highlights of that process. The image on the upper left is a multifamily structure that was located on Fillmore in the 1300 block, so it's east of the park. The city demolished that structure and built 2 single-family houses, which are shown on the upper right-hand corner. The lower left-hand corner is the track and the fence surrounding the track that's in the park. The SORT program paid to pave that track and to construct that decorative fence. So we pivot to sort of current conditions for the neighborhood. Highlighted on that chart is the bottom two rows there, it shows the health for the neighborhood is maintained at-risk or intensive care since we've been tracking neighborhood health. And currently, the neighborhood is at risk west of the park and intensive care south and east of the park. 37% of the housing units in the neighborhood are single family or two family. And when we surveyed the neighborhood for housing conditions, we identified about 2,000 housing deficiencies. I do want to point out, though, that the housing conditions in the neighborhood have generally gotten better from the 2008 plan. There have been a number of infrastructure improvements in the neighborhood over the past few years. Pavement, curb and gutter were replaced throughout the entire neighborhood as part of a citywide half-cent sales tax project. And then sidewalks were improved west of the park with pedestrian plan funding. So the projects that this plan identified as in need are sidewalks, south and east of the park, alleys and sewers. The utility department helped us identify the sewer issues in the neighborhood. And then the ADA compliant ramps, there's still a need for a number of those. So the future land use plan for the neighborhood reflects the single family nature of the neighborhood. It does, however, have multifamily pockets basically on the edges of the neighborhood. The one big change for this plan for the future land use is expanding the mixed use designation at 17th and Washburn. So the focus of the SORT process is to target infrastructure and housing improvements to a 3 to 5 block area within the neighborhood to have the most bang for our buck rather than spreading those improvements out throughout the neighborhood. So the primary target area for Central Park is located south of the park. It's the 1,600 blocks between Buchanan and Western. The secondary planning or target area is east of the park. It's Fillmore and Western between 13th and 16th. Two notes about housing. The neighborhood agreed to work with Cornerstone to build some infill housing in the neighborhood, so they set aside $125,000 of the housing money to assist with that. And the remaining money will be focused on housing rehabilitation. This is probably the most interesting slide we have in this presentation. So to orient you again, the primary target area is south of the park. The secondary target area is east of the park. So this slide shows the number of projects and where they are, SORT infrastructure projects in the neighborhood. There are sewer projects, alley projects, and sidewalk projects, and then again the ADA compliant ramps. There's a total of 29 projected infrastructure projects, which is probably the most projects we've had in a SORT neighborhood. One thing that's interesting about this neighborhood is we identified all the projects we could prioritize in the primary target area, and we're able to move into the secondary target area and construct improvements there as well. So you see sewers and alleys that cross between the two target areas and also sidewalks. Next steps will be to come back here for approval on October 8th and implementation in 20 and 21. We'll note that although he's not here tonight, Bryson Risley is our neighborhood planner, and he did most of the heavy lifting on this plan.
When you were talking about the SORT housing and they put back 125,000, 205, what is that going to provide them? How many infill houses? How much, is that like one?
It will at the very least construct an up and down. So the image that I showed is a vacant lot that the city owns. It will at the very least construct a duplex on that lot, so 2 units on that lot.
In the rehabilitation, is it 5 houses or 25?
So the cap for that program for homeowners is $30,000 and $15,000 for renter properties. So, it kind of depends, I guess.
Okay. Any questions? Councilmember Hiller?
Not a question, but it was fun to
I have two NIAs that meet at the same time the night that Central Park is, so I kind of popped in and out of their planning sessions, but they were very lively and great participation with staff support and with the neighborhood, so compliments on the process.
Yeah, they were great to work with.
Any other discussion or questions? Councilmember Ortiz?
Hey, Dan, is this another phase of their SORT program?
So this is a new sort program for the neighborhood.
It's new?
Yeah.
Okay, because I know they did it kind of in increments, with the track and,
Right, so that was the 2008 sort program, and so that has run its course, and we're back basically starting over with a new
Okay.
program.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
We now proceed to item 6B, discussion regarding the parking vehicles on residential property, if the clerk would read.
B is discussion concerning parking of vehicles on residential property.
Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Tonight, governing body, we have included some information regarding a change to the ordinance related to governing parking in residential lots. Purpose was sort of discussed at a previous time where we looked into the possibility of making some modifications to this ordinance. What these changes, though, do is provide us a better opportunity to look at different materials as being that was required. At one point, when we talked about this previously, we looked at the possibility of having it be required to, couldn't be a pervious surface, it had to be a paved surface. This will allow basically the continued use of gravel as part of your driveway, but it does set some new standards related to what that gravel area would be required to consist of. It would need to be an area that covers the entire location, say where the vehicle is or the camper is, rather than the issue we currently have where they can put it up on blocks and call that sufficient. So this will provide us the opportunity to be able to legislate this. In addition, it will be an opportunity where our officers will be able to observe the conditions that the individual vehicle is parked on from the road. The current rules state that it has to be 4 inches of gravel, and the only way for anyone to ever know how many inches of gravel would be to enter their property, which, given a recent ruling related to that even chalking vehicles is considered to be a violation of their property rights, that's not allowable within regards to our ability to be able to go on property and determine the depth of the gravel. So language has been changed. We ask for your consideration, input, and so that we can consider this going forward. We feel like it is an issue that we would like to avoid. Having people park directly on the grass and dirt is an aesthetic issue within the community, and so we want us to find a way to be able to address that going forward.
Okay, discussion. Comments? Councilmember Ortiz?
Thank you. Brent, so it still has to be 4 inches, is that right?
No, what it has to be is gravel that covers the entire area that doesn't allow vegetation to grow through, or you would have to kill the vegetation underneath. I mean, it just has to be a graveled material and be able to observe that kind of material from the roadway.
Does that include commercial parking lots?
Right now, this would only address the residential, if I remember right, City Attorney, yes. Only the residential at this point.
Can we include commercial?
That's
You know,
part, it has been part of the discussion at times as to whether we need to include commercial as well. We focused, this was a concern primarily in the residential neighborhoods at this point. We see it more frequently that people are parking in the yards, and that was a bigger issue, and so we're addressing that first. But I think if there was a desire to look at commercial properties, we could sure do that.
Well, I think there is, and I'll tell you why. I know that I've had a couple of business owners, and Martin Flynn is one of them, and they bought all this property. Again, if you go down there, Hampton Street is very narrow, and he has a lot of guys that come in and they get in their trucks and then they drive off. And he bought that property. Not all of it's gravel, but I mean it's his property. Nobody's there. The buses come through there, and it would cost them a fortune to concrete it the way that the ordinance reads now. So even if he could do some type of gravel, You know, I've had that with several business owners that it's a lot. And so
Okay.
I'd like to see us look at that commercial end
We'll take a look at it.
soon.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Anyone? Councilmember Jensen?
Is there any bearing to the gravel given to the weight of what's being put on top of it? Obviously, you can scatter some pea gravel on dirt and kill the grass with Roundup, but if it's not sufficient to hold what you're parking on it, it's going to become just a muddied mess.
Right, but I think as I look at that as a possibility, definitely we would be analyzing how things go. I mean, eventually what would happen if they haven't provided the proper amount of gravel, you're going to end up with a mud patch eventually. That rock will be forced into the ground and eventually we'll have more dirt than other, and being able to observe that, we can then take action.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Councilmember Hiller?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Mayor. Had a couple observations. I was, there were people that didn't think we had a problem with this at all, but if we need to fix it, what I did was go back to my notes. We beat this around for somewhere between 3 and 6 months a year ago. So I went back and refreshed some of the comments that I'd made then. And so I have a few. I'll have a handout so people don't need to necessarily take notes, but observations are that people are using a variety of pavers and have right now. Because I think we're on the right track, but I think we're not quite there. That would be the bottom line. People are using a variety of pavers now, and also we do have rock driveways and rock parking pads all over the city. So all districts, all over. Quality can be bad with any materials, not just rock. You can have broken concrete, you can have asphalt with cracks, you can have quality bad anyway, regardless, and therefore grass and weeds will grow and debris will accumulate on all surfaces, not just rock surfaces. So one of the things this talks about is impermeable surfaces, yet permeable surfaces are broadly available in the market today, and in terms of green and sustainable and environmental friendly things, we as a city are doing things with permeable surfaces, and so we want to make sure we address those. I would suggest in this. Many people that do parking pads have traditionally kept them just under the size of their vehicles, so that, I assume for visual purposes, so it just doesn't jump out at you. They make the pad just a little smaller than their RV or their car or their trailer or whatever it is, so they can get the mower under it, but not have it intrude into the yard. So it's just an observation of what people have done in the past. I would suggest that, having been through this a lot of times with different people, that the suggestion of 4 to 6 inches of gravel has been very helpful to people that have no idea how much rock it would take to put a decent surface down, to put in a rock parking pad or a driveway. So I just know that that's just really helpful to give people an idea of how to do it right, if you will. And then last, in terms of observations, we do need to make sure that any changes we make here sync with our inoperable vehicle and premises standards in the IPMC, and any other links with other parts of the city's code or the STO that relate, and I think we are. But I just think we need, before we would vote, we need to make sure we're synced up with the other things. In my observation of what was proposed, I think, though, the proposal to retain the authority by the police and code and the others listed to enforce is really good. So no questions or suggestions there. And I also think that the definition of vehicle or machinery is really good. It covers the territory of what gets parked in places. I would suggest that on page 6, lines 130 to 132, this is for you, Mike, that where it says park or parking shall mean standing of a vehicle or machinery, whether occupied or not, other than temporarily. I think the way to solve that problem of up on blocks is to add the phrase on or over a paved or graveled area. People can look at that, but I just wanted to suggest that. Then in lines 133 to 130, or 140, where it describes the paved or gravel area, it starts out by saying an area comprised of solid, permanent, sealed surface constructed of asphalt, concrete, stone, brick, or other impermeable material. I think we dropped the sealed and the impermeable, because people don't always seal bricks or seal their concrete, or if they use stones or whatever. I don't think we need to say that. It's not something you can see from the street. The issue is it performing? Is it in decent shape? Again, I would just suggest sufficient dimension to accommodate the entire vehicle or machinery with no overhang onto dirt or grass. I think we could eliminate that there in one other place. And then it goes on to say an area comprised of a loose aggregation of rock fragments, thick enough to prevent grass, weeds, and dirt from permeating or penetrating, and so on. I think we need to go back to making that suggestion of 4 to 6 inches, and also just describe that it can be 4 to 6 inches of rock fragments or other material. There are some people who are using like crumbled like tires and things like that, that apparently is pretty successful, other rubber products and so on. I can pass these down. I think if we just describe how it should be constructed, something on the lines of at least 4 to 6 inches of rock fragments or other material spread to a level surface and constructed or maintained in such a way as to prevent grass and so on. I do think we need to add a phrase that says in the case of the solid permanent surface or the rock, in both 1 and 2, such areas must be maintained free of vegetation, debris, and standing water. And that would cover anybody's broken up driveway or sunken down driveway or whatever. And I'll pass these around for people to look at. I just wanted to bring those thoughts. I think we're on a good track.
City Manager?
The issue related to the 4 to 6 inches of particular material and that being a requirement is a problem. It is not something that you can tell how deep something is from the roadway. We can't enter the property and determine that. And I'm happy to let Luther explain further as to why we've had to go this direction. It's just not, it's saying at least, and I mean, you can suggest that that's the best way to build it, but if you require it as that, then we have a problem.
Can I reply? I recall that discussion. I do think that if we take it out, we want to have that someplace administratively to advise people. It just helps them. I do think, though, that you can't tell whether something's sealed from the street either. If with code, whether it's police or code compliance, if the observation from the street is that it is in poor condition, then they can write that up, at which point somebody can come and show them and demonstrate that it's 4 to 6 inches. Even if it is, though, if it's sunk down and it has standing water or the kinds of things that you can observe from the street, those are the things we really have problems with. Or if people have, again, grass can grow up in anything, but if they haven't weeded it or mowed it or taken care of it so that it's not unsightly.
No, I understand that.
I just know how much that guidance makes a difference. People just have no idea. So I'm open to the conversation about it. I just wanted to bring that point back. Because I don't want us to come back once a year and have to check on it. I want our people to be able to go and it's either okay, or if they need to give people some guidance about what was needed, they can check the depth then.
Yeah. Mr. Gagne, do you have anything that you feel needs to be added to the conversation here that we've missed?
If I might, just make a couple of comments for your consideration. Part of the reason that this issue was brought up before was it's the people that are enforcing this ordinance that need the guidance. If we pass a regulation as a city that says you have to have 4 inches of gravel, how do we enforce that? How do we verify it? Somebody has to go up and walk onto the property and measure it. and that presents a problem for a police officer, because then we're talking about searching. And what we did with this proposal is write it in such a way that a police officer or a property maintenance inspector can verify it from a public place where they don't need a warrant or consent or anything like that. They can look at it and verify whether the property is in compliance or not. When you start adding depth requirements, the only way to really verify whether it's 4 inches or not is to walk up onto the property and measure it, and that presents a problem for us.
Councilmember Lesser?
Thank you. I would refer, I mean, one thing we do have is an expert in excavation, and I think it's tough to put a 4 to 6, 8, 10, whatever it is. I mean, because depending upon what the item is that's going to go on it, would have a great deal to do with penetration of the gravel as well as the condition of the soil, et cetera. So I'm going to refer to see what Councilman Emerson has to say on the issue as a question.
Councilmember?
First of all, I use expert very loosely in this case.
I usually do with you, yes.
Mr. Lesser? I mean, typically, I mean, yeah, when we put what we call crushed rock surfacing, it's normally 6 inches deep, and that's usually sufficient. But if you are going to have something, I'm sorry, this is probably more than you guys really want to know, but if you're building like a new driveway, ideally you go and you take the topsoil off, and you'd usually want to put some larger material first and pack that in over the time of construction or whatever. Then you'd cap it with some smaller aggregate, some what we call AB3 is regular driveway rock. But I know I wasn't asked to weigh in on this yet, but one of the things I don't know, though, with all this is what problem we're trying to solve. We're not necessarily worrying about people's driveways. I think what we're trying to solve, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I guess, Deputy Mayor, you brought this up, but is people that come and they just pull in the yard right in front of their porch sideways, and it's a big mud hole and stuff. And I know at least driveways in the city, you have to have a permit when you make a drive. So is it possible, if you want to expand your drive, it's another permit? And that would be a way then of it being constructed to certain standards?
Well, actually, we're having that discussion today, Bill Finder, on another particular issue, but if you want to expand your existing driveway, you can do that without a permit. So that's something that you can do. However, when you enter the right-of-way and have to make a change, say, in your approach in the city's right-of-way, then you have to draw a permit. So someone that wanted to just add, so to speak, another lane to park vehicles on in their driveway would not be required to have a permit. Did I say that right, Bill? Thank you.
And I think, and I agree, Councilmember Emerson, the goal is to get people off the grass. I had, actually, when people heard that this was coming up, I had a lot of calls today. And people were saying, you know, my neighbor's yard is a parking lot. They just pull up there and they just park. I think Councilmember Hiller made a suggestion of the 4 to 6 as a guideline, and I think that's what we can use it as, a suggestion of a guideline. Mm-hmm. So even if you put in here suggested 4 to 6 of gravel, because I think when you get to point of doing it, it's done a certain way, unless they're going to do it themselves. And I don't think I think there's just the driveways out there that have not been kept up, you know, so all they need to do is get some more gravel in there and they're done. You said something about the other material, add loose aggregation of rock fragments or other material. I think that's dangerous. I mean, somebody could put plastic bags out there and say, hey, this is other material. You said I could use other material. So I think we want to keep it, we don't want to come into an additional problem of the aesthetics looking terrible because everybody's using a different kind of material in their driveway. So that worried me. And the overhang, yes, some people mow under it. Most people do not, at least in my neck of the woods. And So I would suggest that stay in. And I think the park and the parking, they were saying what park and parking means, not the fact on what you're parked on. It's just this is what park and park means, the standing still vehicle. Yes.
Well, what I thought they were trying to do, which again, I didn't think was a problem, and a lot of people didn't in the old language, was to somehow get language that indicated that you had to be, that even if you had to put your car up on blocks or up higher than that, that it still was not allowed unless it was paved or gravelled underneath. And so I just wasn't sure that the shift had worked, so that was my shot at it. Back to the 4 to 6 inches, what the proposal that we had today says is, as an area comprised of rock fragments, for instance gravel, thick enough to prevent grass, weeds, and so on. I thought that was a whole lot more vague than 4 to 6 inches. And I agree with Councilman Emerson. I mean, my son did my driveway, and to do it really right, there's kind of a fabric that you roll out that will keep the weeds and so on from going through. But at this point, my driveway is 15 years old, and you know what? They collect dirt, and grass grows up in the cracks between really nice concrete driveways or bricks or pavers or whatever you have. I mentioned the other materials, and again, we can all talk about it, or maybe go to Menards and wander around and see what people are getting sold. But I know that people in my district have done a very nice job with pavers that they've been able to purchase at the local hardware store or the lumberyard places, and there are new ones that are made out of plastics. We're doing things even with the city with permeable pavers and things like that. And Echo Ridge was, the whole sidewalks are permeable pavers, and I don't know what those are made out of exactly, but I wouldn't want us to limit somebody choosing a very something that would be solid, that wouldn't have standing water, that would meet our code otherwise. And so I just think I'm not claiming that what I put out is the end, but if we really want to look at performance, then that it needs to be neat and maintained in good condition from the beginning, and not deal with how it's installed or exactly what the materials are at all. So those are just the thoughts.
Councilmember Mates.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just reading this, I mean, I think if there are pavers that come out in new, I don't know, materials, I think it'd be covered because it does say other similar impermeable material. I think that would be sufficient, wouldn't it? I mean, to cover any new things that come out, or?
We just depend on whether it's permeable, which is the latest in construction all over for green, environmentally friendly construction.
We may be able to do an either or. It may be that it's permeable or impermeable as far as pavers or materials, because you can have a permeable asphalt surface as well. So maybe it ends up being a permeable or impermeable material there.
Councilmember Emerson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess I'm still just a little maybe troubled by the approach, because I totally understand the intent, and just like the last time this came up, I'm worried that it's going to entrap a lot of people, who their driver's in poor shape because they don't have the money to fix it. And I think what we're trying to fix is people that are bad neighbors that pull in and start creating ruts in their yard and stuff. Is there a different way to do that without dictating? And I don't know. I'm just asking the question because, again, I see so many of the well-meaning things we do end up affecting people who just can't afford to, their driveway's in bad shape because they can't afford to put new gravel in every year, every 5 years. So I hate to go down that pathway where we're criminalizing people for being poor.
Well, I understand the concerns, Councilman. For me, though, I look at, as we address these issues, if you have an area that is your driveway and the area there, and then also have this other area where you're parking your vehicles and you truly are parking it on dirt, I think, our focus is that. That is our focus. But you have to describe the surface that they are parking on, because that area is become for them the extension of their driveway. And so it ends up covering both areas. And so when they're parking, even though they're not using their driveway, they are using that area as their driveway where they're parking their vehicle. That's the purpose of the driveway. And so I think you have to look at the surface material for the driveway and cover that as well. And I know that could potentially force an individual that has an extra expense. But I think also that's the only way to really make sure you're covering both areas.
And in answer to that too, I mean, we have code compliance, weeds. What if somebody's poor and they don't have a lawnmower? I mean, the house needs painted, somebody can't afford it. I mean, I've been there, but you find a way. If it's the law and the ordinance, you find a way to do that. But I don't think those people would say, I can't afford it, so I still want my neighborhood to look like crap. I think they want everyone wants their neighborhood to look nice, and I think they will. There's people that'll help them, neighbors, friends, family. I don't like using that for a reason, because I have been there, and I just figured it out because I wanted to be compliant. Anyone else? Any more discussion on this item? Oh, you guys caught me off guard. Okay. So now, any other questions? Ooh, now we proceed to the announcements. So, City Manager.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. We do not have a meeting for the next 2 weeks. Our next meeting is October 8th. But to give you a little bit of foreshadowing as to the items that we were looking at covering there, we will have in the action items, the Central Park Neighborhood Plan will come back for approval. The 2020 Neighborhood Empowerment Grant recommendations will be presented. The sort target areas will be updated as to who was selected. The Title IX code revisions, request for referral to the Policy and Finance Committee. And then also this parking ordinance, either with or without modifications once we go back and look at it. In the discussion area, we'll have the special alcohol grant recommendations will be presented. I've talked to a few of you, and we'll be talking to the rest regarding some modifications to the order of some of the items in the agenda, looking at bringing that forward for discussion. Also, a discussion item that will come from the Policy and Finance Committee regarding term limits. And then our hazmat cleanup ordinance, which is something that we've been working on with our fire department when we have issues with accidents and whatnot. And also review a program overview of our TWTW program. We had a very good year with our Topeka Way to Work program, and so we'll go over some of the accomplishments of the students, young adults in that program. So that's what we'll be looking at when we get together on October 8th.
Okay, Councilmember Mays. Councilmember Cohen.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I want to invite you guys, next Saturday is Oktoberfest at Fairlawn Plaza. You guys have been there. You've heard the polka music and maybe done a little sip-in. And also the wiener dog races begin at 1 o'clock. So I invite you guys over to the west side. It's always a fun time over there. Thanks.
Councilmember Lesser.
Thank you. All I really have is I wanted to wish a happy 55th. I told him I would embarrass him. 55th birthday to Mr. Tommy Meyer, Hayden and Washburn Hall of Famer, who is also I get the pleasure of working with. But I told him I would harass him and tell him happy 55th, 5 years older than me birthday.
Councilmember Hiller.
Thank you. Just, there are so many events in the next couple of weeks. I would refer people to Topeka 365 or their Facebook events pages to pick out what they want. But I mentioned the Aaron Douglas Art Fair last week. It's the 28th, and certainly hope people get over there between 10 and 5 at 12th and Lane. And that's it.
Okay, Councilmember Ortiz. Well, a happy 64 birthday to me on Friday.
Well, all right.
I'm a lot older than you. Okay, We are now ready to proceed with public comment. And the first person signed up to speak is Clark Trummel.
I'm going to have to work with you on my name.
I knew it when I said it. I knew that was not right.
That's okay. Good evening. I've got a few points I'd like to bring up relative to what I saw on the agenda this evening. The housing study, I think, is excellent, and I hope you all become very engaged with that for the obvious reasons of what they're doing. The question I would have is, what's going to be done with the report once it gets done? And how are you all going to observe it, use it, and discuss it? And I think that needs to be addressed so the public understands, because that is a big, big issue. I think the discussion we had a minute ago about Central Park, the neighborhood, I hope these two guys are listening to each other, because that definitely fits right into that subject of the study of housing. I would also like to point out in Central Park, it's important to remember there's a lot of little tentacles that run around through these topics. One of them is we have a 60% area as a food desert in this community. Oakland just lost their grocery store. Central Park, when Dylan's left, I've been working with a group for over a year and a half to get everything done so we could go out and solicit for a grocery store to come back into the area. So we can do all the good things we want to do in this town, but if we don't have the underpinnings there, they're going to serve no purpose, and we're not going to get the results we want. So please be sensitive to that when you look at what these folks are doing and saying and advising you on, that we cover all the bases to make it work right. The last thing I want to talk about is this parking vehicles. I'd like to see that we just don't allow vehicles parked on the front lawn, period. And I want to pick up on what Councilman Emerson said, and maybe there's an answer to it that I'm not aware of, because I don't know a lot of what goes on underneath the ordinances or what I hear you all talk about. But you asked, why don't we have it permitted? And the answer was, we just don't get permits. Well, maybe the second question is, why don't we have them permit to do that? And if the answer is we can't, why? So we all understand. But part of the problems with gravel and whatever, as we all know, and the city manager made it very clear, is that we can only observe from a distance. And nobody is that good. You get your binoculars out. If I've got my car parked backwards, you can't see the license tag. I mean, people know how to play the game. I was told by a code enforcement officer 2 years ago at an NIA meeting, may have changed, that if you have a hot rod or a race car, you can park that on the front yard because it's not illegal in the ordinance, because it's not considered a vehicle. So maybe we need to go back to code stage 1 and look at what it is we want to do, why we can't get it done, and then find out what we need to do to change it to get it done. And I'm not hearing that, and I'm not being critical, but it's just part of the way conversations happen. We get caught up in it and we just pick up where we left off, or we go from where we're at to go forward. Maybe we need to go back further to step 1, understanding why we're here having the conversation to make the right decisions to go forward. So that's a tough one. Gravel, cars parked, machinery. I've got problems in my district and my neighborhood that really affect the aesthetic quality of the neighborhood, values of properties. You want to talk about raising revenue, keep the value of property up. So that's what I have to say to that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Next to speak, Mr. Joseph Ledbetter.
Evening, everybody. These comments are mine alone. I'm going to be speaking to you about the Parks and Rec Advisory Council, which I'm on. I've been on for 3 years. Probably the most exciting advisory board you could serve on at this point in time. We have a lot going on, and one of the things that has happened is we were not engaged about the $10 million to be spent on URISH in the CIP as part of the advisory. Under the contract which the city and county constructed to take over the parks, the advisory is a very important role, and one of them is to look at all these projects, CIP, capital improvements, program changes, any of that would be brought forward to the county. Unfortunately, we were bypassed on that process. One of my concerns I'm bringing forward to you is neighborhood parks. I have a passion about neighborhood parks and as well as the bike trails. We have at least 7 very deficient parks in populated neighborhoods, lots of kids in these neighborhoods that have almost no playground equipment, and I'm going to talk about them and list them. We have Gwen Brooks Park in the 5th District, Country Club Park in the 3rd District. We have Seabrook Park in the 8th District. Willow Park is in the 1st District. We have Children's Park, which is in the 6th District. Meadow Park, I think that's 6th District. All of these parks have a deficiency of playground equipment. Playground equipment that's been taken away under the Shawnee County Parks and Rec and not replaced. Now in the contract it talks about the county shall maintain Parks and Rec and upkeep them, and shall maintain and upkeep equipment. So it does allow you to upgrade everything in those parks. And I am very dissatisfied as a member, as are many of the members, about the lack of infusion of funds to replace this playground equipment that is deficient or non-existent in some of these parks. Again, I'm not saying it's absolutely missing. I'm saying that multiple pieces of equipment are gone from what they once had and they have not been replaced. So if you want the city to grow, and I hope you do, we're losing population now. One of the things that people look for, especially young families, when they go buy houses, is yes, schools, but they also are looking for those neighborhood parks. I've talked to a number of realtors. They say those neighborhood parks with playground equipment are very important to the stability of neighborhoods, to housing values, and that should also be talked about in this housing study that we're going to do. I just want to say that when I served on Quality of Place for Momentum 2022, for almost 2 years as vice chair, we talked a lot about Parks and Rec. We talked a lot about quality of life, quality of place, and these are very important things for this community. So Parks and Rec is very important, and one thing I would like the council people to do is push for the neighborhood parks in your areas to be adequately maintained. If that means dropping a line to a commissioner, or you may even have a commissioner sitting here tonight, I don't know. That may happen. There's people running for that spot that's going to be vacated. Talk to these people and say, hey, we need these neighborhood parks maintained. And we don't want to lose Oakland Pool. That's being talked about. We don't want a lot of these things to disappear that we already have. So we do need the help of the council in helping push that. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. There is a need for 2 executive sessions this evening. City Attorney, will you read the parameters?
Motion would be to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 15 minutes to discuss the acquisition of real property necessary for the reconstruction of Southwest 10th Avenue and Fairlawn to Wanamaker, as justified by KSA 75-4319B6. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present: members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber, Administrative and Financial Services Director Jessica Lamondola, Public Works Director Jason Peak, and myself. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes in the governing body chambers.
So moved.
Okay. So Councilmember Ortiz and Councilmember Jensen. Okay, all those in favor of the first executive session vote yes. All those opposed vote no.
We have 9 yes.
9 voted yes. We will go into the executive session when the room is cleared. Thank you for coming.
Okay. So it is this orange thing right here. And so what happens is
There's a need for an additional executive session this evening. City Attorney, will you read the parameters?
You're up, Lisa.
motion is to recess into executive session for a period of time not to exceed 20 minutes for consultation with the city's legal counsel to discuss attorney-client privilege matters related to potential litigation as justified by KSA 75-4319B2. In order to aid the discussion, the following individuals should be present to participate. Members of the governing body, City Manager Brent Trout, Deputy City Manager Doug Gerber, Financial and Administrative Services Director Jessica Lamondola, Police Chief Bill Cochran, Chief of Litigation Shelley Starr, John Frieden, Kevin Fowler, Jeff Reeves, and myself. No action is anticipated to be taken when the open meeting resumes.
Okay, do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Emerson and Jensen. Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Lesser opposed?
No, I'm going to. I was like getting it up.
Okay. There's a need to return to executive session for a period of 15 minutes. City Attorney, parameters, same parameters?
Yes, same parameters.
Same parameters. Do we have a Councilmember Emerson, Councilmember Cohen? All in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, same sign. We will be back in 15 minutes.